I had a simple allergic reaction, but ended up Baker acted, raped and drugged. It wasn't psychosis, just ignored pain. OMG. First, I want to clarify that my experience may sound unbelievable, but it is entirely true. This genuinely occurred to me. One evening, I inadvertently consumed an unusual spice at my boyfriend's father's home, mistakenly thinking it was pepper. However, it was not. I had never experienced an allergic reaction before, and I merely assumed my burning throat was due to the spice's heat. Since I had never previously tasted such a spice, I was unaware that it should not feel so painful. I brushed it off because my boyfriend appeared unfazed. A few days later, my face felt severely congested and swollen. The doctor prescribed medication for the flu, but it did not alleviate my symptoms. 2 days later, I began hyperventilating and returned to the doctor's office 1 week after my initial visit. This time, they prescribed prednisone, a steroid nasal spray, and a steroid inhaler. Although the prednisone provided some relief for a few hours, I soon found myself hyperventilating again. Upon my next visit to the doctors, a chest X-ray was conducted. They reported no abnormalities and attributed my symptoms to post-nasal drip due to the flu. Keep in mind, I spoke with the doctors for 5 uninterrupted minutes while they could clearly hear and see my struggle to talk and breathe. Consequently, I sought help from an ear, nose, and throat specialist because I felt my ears and throat were contributing to my discomfort. However, the specialist was unable to insert his endoscope into my nose due to significant swelling and infection. He prescribed an antibiotic, ordered a CT scan, and provided allergy medication. I mentioned that my face felt as though it was melting and that I was experiencing heart issues. His response: he was solely an ear, nose, and throat doctor and suggested I consult a cardiologist. Days later, I found myself in the emergency room, hyperventilating severely, with my face in distress and my heart racing. I was taking NyQuil, antibiotics, nasal spray, a steroid inhaler, and prednisone. The emergency room staff documented an allergic reaction to prednisone, which the doctor never communicated to us. He even advised continuing the prednisone and instructed me not to take Sudafed, while despite my boyfriend's assertions that I had no anxiety history, provided me with anxiety medication. He also discussed other patients loudly, allowing me to hear about them from my room. After being released, I returned to the ER a little over 12 hours later, experiencing intense facial tingling and burning sensations, alongside disorientation. The attending physician dismissed my concerns and prescribed Sudafed. My boyfriend attempted to inform the nurse that the previous doctor had advised against it, but we were assured it would be fine. I took Sudafed, which led to severe disorientation and various other symptoms, prompting another trip to the ER. I likely sounded irrational, as I communicated that I believed I had sepsis, not because I truly thought so, but due to my inability to express myself clearly from the effects of the medications. I also recounted information from the first ER doctor, which further contributed to my seeming insanity. Ultimately, this visit resulted in a suggestion to Baker Act me. The Baker Act essentially forces an individual into a mental health facility. Once more, no one advised me to discontinue any medications. The following day was incredibly difficult. I screamed about how my face felt as though it were melting, that my facial nerves were disconnecting, and that my insides felt rotten. My boyfriend reached out to the pharmacist, who suggested this atypical behavior, emerging post-medication, indicated that I was under the influence of drugs and recommended stopping the medications and visiting a health clinic. The next morning, I was taken to a health clinic. However, instead of consulting a physician, I spoke with a psychologist. My boyfriend offered me the opportunity to discuss anything. In typical fashion, I recounted a fall I had when I was 12 and its lingering effects on me, particularly my leg pain. Then, I shifted my focus to my breathing issues, but repeated what the first ER doctor had said regarding other patients, which my boyfriend pointed out to the psychologist. Subsequently, I was taken to the X-ray room. There was no X-ray technician available, and a nurse performed the X-ray instead, instructing me to assume incorrect positions. It had been nearly 2 weeks since my last X-ray, which I had needed to repeat due to a wardrobe malfunction. When I told the nurse that the X-ray was done incorrectly, she asked me to demonstrate. After I did, she informed me that she could not repeat the procedure. I insisted I wouldn't leave until she did, leading to a heated argument. The police were summoned due to my refusal to exit the room. When they arrived and spoke with me, they were extremely puzzled by the entire incident. Ultimately, the nurses decided to Baker Act me. Thus, I was taken to a mental health facility. I reiterated my significant, physical, pain, but once again, my pleas were disregarded. I shared the sequence of events that had transpired, and then my boyfriend entered the room. The psychologist began to assert that I was unstable, and my boyfriend entertained this notion. I urged him to stop, insisting I did not belong there and that I was genuinely in physical pain. After being isolated in a room for an extended period, I was informed that I must remain. I was moved to a unit where I received a drink. The first individual I encountered shared my first name. Can you imagine the impact that had on me at that moment? It made me question my sanity. Nonetheless, it was true, just like everything else. When I tried to rest in my bed, the pain re-emerged, prompting me to scream repeatedly. A nurse rushed over and constantly insisted, "You're not in pain," which only made me scream louder. I demanded they contact my boyfriend. Instead, they summoned multiple nurses and sedated me. The next memory I have is of being assaulted. I will omit the details, but I recall vividly being given my sweater to clean myself and inadvertently dropping it on my shoes while the nurse assisted me in adjusting my underwear. I rejected all medication except for my antibiotic. After a day and a half, I began to feel better and realized that something traumatic had occurred. The psychologist brought me into another room, at which point I expressed my desire for legal representation. I was taken into a different space, where a staff member informed me that taking medication was a prerequisite for obtaining a lawyer. Reluctantly, I began taking the medication again and soon felt a return to the disorientation I had experienced earlier. I remained in the facility for 2 weeks, under heavy medication, and was compelled to participate in an outpatient program, which required taking more and more drugs. Despite suffering severe side effects from the medications, they continued prescribing the same ones and added more to address those side effects. A month after my initial admission to the mental health facility, I discovered I was 8 weeks pregnant. The medications were wreaking havoc, and all I could communicate to my boyfriend was that something terrible had happened to me. He researched the medications and found alarming information regarding their potential effects on fetuses, which led to my decision to terminate the pregnancy. I cannot adequately convey the horror I experienced. I continued the medications for an additional 2 to 3 weeks after the outpatient program. My boyfriend was extremely frustrated, as the doctors informed him that I was psychotic and would require medication for at least a year, if not indefinitely. I repeatedly attempted to explain that the medications were responsible for my state of mind, not that I was genuinely psychotic. Eventually, I detailed the timeline of events to him, and he began to see the inconsistencies. He sought counsel from a therapist. We engaged in heated discussions about my desire to discontinue the medication and my refusal to see a therapist or psychologist, or to pick up any new prescriptions, just in case. After conferring with his therapist, he was advised, "Let her, she's an adult." I cannot express how grateful I am. I cannot articulate the terror I endured. I cannot sufficiently thank a person I have never met for finally acknowledging what I had been saying. After that, I officially stopped taking the medications, and there was no further debate. Guess what? My heart rate stabilized. The pain in my face gradually diminished. My cognitive fog lifted, and I regained my ability to concentrate and act with vitality. I was finally capable of opening my Gatorade bottles again. Most importantly, I felt relief and a return to some semblance of normalcy. Then, the emotional weight of my experiences began to overwhelm me. Panic attacks emerged as memories resurfaced more vividly. Eventually, I recalled details of the assault and the subsequent events as I communicated with my boyfriend. It was profoundly distressing and painful. I attempted to seek legal representation, but the malpractice lawyer informed me I needed to consult a criminal attorney, who then stated a civil attorney was required. No one was willing to take my case. It has been over a year and a couple of months since then. I feel the need to express my feelings. My boyfriend is incredible. I love him dearly. He truly is a compassionate, affectionate partner. During my time in the mental health facility, he called me daily and visited twice as well. However, the issue lies in the fact that he did not believe me when I needed his support the most. He did not advocate for me when it mattered. He now believes my story and has stood up for me since. This past summer, I began experiencing allergic reactions that escalated into anaphylaxis, leading to hyperventilation once more. I consulted a different medical group regarding this. My boyfriend and I had signed up with the same doctor 2 months prior, and ironically, he had an appointment on the same day. She evaluated both of us, him for his lab results and me for my hyperventilation. Her initial assessment was that I was having a panic attack. My boyfriend interjected, stating, "She is having an allergic reaction, not a panic attack." In response, she said, "Fine, I will administer a high dose of something akin to Benadryl. If she does not improve in 15 minutes, then it's a panic attack." After receiving the injection, I improved significantly within 15 minutes. Case closed. Case closed. I took the following day off due to extreme fatigue. When I returned the next day, I began hyperventilating again. I contacted my doctor, who prescribed asthma medication that provided considerable relief. A few weeks later, I suspected a sinus infection and was prescribed the same antibiotics the ENT had given me months earlier before my ER visit. I experienced a rapid heartbeat and other unusual side effects, prompting me to notify my doctor, who then switched my antibiotics. I felt much better afterward, but I scheduled an appointment with her, as she stated that she wouldn't prescribe further antibiotics without an in-person evaluation. During that appointment, she suggested I likely had asthma and that it was causing my allergic reactions. She prescribed an allergy medication and a nasal spray, both of which had been prescribed previously by the ENT. The day after I began taking the allergy medication, I experienced burning sensations in my face. I immediately contacted my doctor, who advised me to stop taking it but continue with the nasal spray. This was on a Friday. I arranged an appointment for the following Monday, but she was unavailable, and I spoke to another male doctor who was dismissive and unkind. My boyfriend once again defended me and pointed out the doctor's lack of professionalism. My doctor called me the next day. I informed her that my facial burning persisted. She instructed me to discontinue all medications, transitioning to Allegra exclusively, and to use a nasal rinse 3 times daily for 3 days, then reduce to twice daily. She also recommended I continue the asthma medication even after my improvement. And it worked. I experienced no more burning sensations in my face or hyperventilation. When I consumed anything that irritated my throat, for example, a sip of German beer or an Indian dish, I would promptly take Allegra or Benadryl alongside my asthma medication, and I would feel fine. Ultimately, my previous claims have been validated. I was not psychotic. I experienced severe side effects from the medications. My ability to communicate was compromised. I was raped. I was given drugs to suppress those memories. I was exploited for insurance gain. I was ignored, mistreated, and made to feel as though I was losing my sanity. At the core, all I experienced was an allergic reaction that could have been easily resolved. After everything that has transpired, I still love my boyfriend immensely. He has been my pillar of support since then. He has acknowledged his mistakes. As Valentine's Day approaches, I find it difficult to feel for him as I once did. He prioritized the doctor's assessments over my truth when I needed him to trust and advocate for me. I feel a profound sense of sadness. I suspect he is aware of my feelings. I am quite certain he knows. He is making every effort to atone for his past actions, but I yearn to return to the way I felt before, and it just isn't possible. I feel deep remorse. Story 2. I returned to work, only to find Grumpy fired everyone due to unpaid labor for the supermarket. Dead weight gone, morale restored. First and foremost, I want to mention that I am using a mobile device and do not speak English fluently. Secondly, I recalled this story due to the recent passing of the protagonist. Grumpy, you will be greatly missed. I had the opportunity to meet Grumpy at Narcotics Anonymous, where he volunteered after receiving assistance from the organization. He became my sponsor, and recognizing my efforts to turn my life around, he offered me my first job after graduating from high school. Grumpy managed a store for a company that provided all the necessary materials for constructing a house, from concrete and bricks to custom-made cabinetry. I began my career as a loader, responsible for filling the trucks designated for deliveries. To provide some context about the company, which is significant later, it was established in the early 1980s, initially selling construction materials wholesale to professionals. During their first expansion, they gained an excellent reputation for their pricing on power tools, bespoke cupboards, and landscaping products, including custom garden furniture. The stores were essentially large warehouses. In the mid-1990s, they opened their doors to the general public, coinciding with a surge in do-it-yourself projects that greatly increased sales. This led to a second, smaller wave of expansion and the establishment of an online store, which initially only accepted phone orders but later developed into a full-fledged website. When I joined, the management had made adjustments to their business plan, downsizing areas that were not major revenue generators, like bricks and concrete, and instead focusing more on high-demand items such as custom furniture, landscaping, tools, and for some inexplicable reason, plumbing supplies. My first 8 months at the company were fantastic. Grumpy was a remarkable manager. Having started at the company around the same age I was, he had worked his way up through the ranks, developing a unique managerial style. His philosophy was straightforward. If my employees are satisfied, they perform better and provide superior service, which results in improved sales. This approach enabled Grumpy to oversee one of the inner-city stores, which, despite being smaller compared to others, ranked fourth in revenue on a national scale and first in customer satisfaction. However, the origin of his nickname emerged later on. Although everyone referred to him as Grumpy, a title he wore with a certain pride, he was anything but. His demeanor stemmed from a medical condition affecting his nerves, which left him with a permanent frown. He had previously declined promotions because he understood that added stress would exacerbate his condition, preventing him from performing at his best. Eventually, his health deteriorated unexpectedly, leading to hospitalization and a period of sick leave. Instead of appointing one of Grumpy's assistants as acting manager, headquarters decided to bring in a regional manager to oversee the store temporarily. We shall refer to him as Wilhelm. Wilhelm was the complete antithesis of Grumpy. Younger than Grumpy, in his late 20s compared to Grumpy's late 30s, he held a business degree and had never worked on the sales floor. He was hired directly as an office worker and had ascended to regional manager. His assignment to our store was a result of the company's revised business plan. The shift in focus had resulted in significant amounts of unused space within the stores. A supermarket chain approached the company with an offer to lease this unused area, particularly in inner-city locations. The company agreed and placed regional managers in key stores to facilitate this integration. However, the supermarket chain had earned a reputation for poor employment practices, including a negative experience relayed by one of our cashiers, who had worked there for 3 years before joining our organization. Wilhelm's management approach was unhelpful as well. His strategy was solely centered around one principle: generate more revenue by any means necessary. He started by changing our scheduling from monthly to weekly, increasing sales targets to unattainable levels, and perpetually demanding more. Within the first 2 weeks, 6 experienced employees departed, 4 quit while 2 were dismissed, and were replaced with inexperienced recruits who were easier to manipulate. Then the integration with the supermarket took place. The sales floor was the first to feel the repercussions. The supermarket opened with insufficient staffing. Wilhelm began assigning employees to assist for 4 to 6 hours while still requiring them to fulfill their regular shifts. Anyone who refused faced disciplinary action. 2 write-ups within 6 months resulted in termination. Wilhelm then imposed his authority over the loading area, which was shared between the 2 stores. He mandated that we must prioritize assisting the 2 employees from the supermarket with unloading their deliveries before we could start loading our own trucks. This scheduling would completely derail our delivery timelines. The loading crew operated from 0500 to 1300, focusing on loading trucks with longer travels first so they could depart by 0700 at the latest. The company maintained a next-day delivery policy within a 150-mile radius. Wilhelm's orders meant we could not commence loading our trucks until 0730, and theirs could not start their routes until 0930. We communicated. He insisted we handle both responsibilities, and when asked about overtime, he denied the request. He proclaimed that we were already compensated too generously for working unsocial hours, from 0500 to 0800, and leaving early, so he would not approve overtime. As a result, a once pleasant work environment became unbearable, and morale deteriorated. We lost 10 members of the loading crew in a month due to the new regulations, and the new hires did not remain with us for long. The sales floor also faced challenges, experiencing high turnover rates. Those who stayed were either seeking new employment, fearful of unemployment, or too inexperienced to realize the situation was dire. Sales experienced a slight downturn, but customer satisfaction decreased drastically. After nearly 6 months, the remaining old guard were prepared to resign. Then our savior returned. Almost 6 months post-hospitalization, Grumpy walked back into the store to reclaim his rightful role. He did not arrive as a heroic figure, clad in shining armor and riding a noble steed, but rather in standard attire, slightly limping and leaning on a cane. We organized a welcome back celebration and felt a flicker of hope with his return. We were informed that Grumpy would begin with light duties for 2 weeks before reclaiming the manager position. However, despite Grumpy's return, Wilhelm remained the regional manager, explicitly reminding us in private discussions of his superiority. If anyone were caught complaining to Grumpy, we would be as good as gone. Still, several of us were planning to meet with Grumpy after his adjustment period to discuss our concerns. Yet another department had different plans. During Wilhelm's reign of terror, the workshop was the only department he failed to manage effectively. He recognized that if he mistreated them as he did us, they would quit, causing a collapse in sales, since custom furniture was the top seller. Consequently, the head carpenter convened a meeting with Grumpy on his second day to discuss the future of the workshop, but ultimately revealed Wilhelm's actions. Under the guise of catching up with changes, Grumpy held meetings with everyone, uncovering the truth about Wilhelm's misdeeds and the influx of new staff. It became evident that Grumpy grew increasingly furious with each meeting. He also had an eye-opening discussion with the supermarket manager. At last, Grumpy was ready to resume his managerial role, the revenge. On his first day back as manager, Grumpy informed everyone that a mandatory meeting would take place after the store closed. He had a plan, so we gathered after closing hours, and Grumpy laid out his strategy. For the next few days, nobody except him would come to the store. Should anyone receive calls, we were instructed to direct them to him, which we did when inquiries began flowing in regarding the store's closure. Grumpy's explanation to headquarters was straightforward. The employees were engaged in secondary jobs during their shifts, constituting a breach of contract, necessitating their termination and the search for new staff. This statement drew attention from headquarters since no such issues had been reported in the previous 6 months. They requested evidence from Grumpy, which he happily provided, including our written testimonies, resulting in a significant backlash against Wilhelm. You see, Wilhelm had an arrangement with the supermarket manager. He received kickbacks for our unpaid labor, and the manager proposed the same arrangement to Grumpy. He also mentioned that Wilhelm regularly declined to approve overtime, which meant if any of us reported to the labor department, the company would face significant penalties. The aftermath, Wilhelm was promptly dismissed. We all received calls to interview for open positions within the company. Additionally, we were granted severance pay for our termination, along with most of the unpaid overtime, around 80% of it. Almost all of us returned to work with modest pay increases, reflecting our experience. The company conducted a thorough evaluation of the supermarket chain, distancing itself from them. They remained until their lease ended, but ceased any shared employees, many of whom crossed over to our side. The next time Grumpy required time off, one of his assistants took over and excelled, subsequently earning promotions to manager positions at other stores. Grumpy reinstated his usual management style, leading to an increase in both sales and customer satisfaction. I departed from the job 3 years later for a better paying opportunity, but I will always remember Grumpy as one of the finest managers I have ever had. Story 3. I paid off my car loan and he got mad I wouldn't put his name on the title. After 3 years, I'm done feeling like I'm doing it all. WTF. I need your insights, Reddit. Please be honest with me. I, 20-year-old female, have been in a relationship with my boyfriend, 21-year-old male, for nearly 3 years. He has never maintained a steady job, only doing odd jobs, and is unwilling to work a traditional 9 to 5. In his perspective, it is simply a waste of time. Throughout our relationship, we have been residing at his grandmother's house. Just to emphasize, this has been the case for 3 years. He has held a maximum of 6 different informal construction jobs that did not pay well, leading him to quit frequently. In contrast, I have held 5 different jobs in the last 2 years we have been together. During our first year together, he insisted that I shouldn't work, arguing that a woman should not have to do a man's job. Fast forward a year, and we find ourselves in a situation where there is no money coming in. I need to eat, right? Consequently, we struggled to feed ourselves, and I decided that enough was enough. I secured my first job at $12 an hour, which lasted for some time. The hours were far from ideal, but I managed to get by. I switched jobs due to issues with transportation and insufficient hours. Recently, I found a vehicle in August 2024 for $2,500. It wasn't too expensive, but the vehicle runs reliably. However, my boyfriend was unable to assist in any way. I saved money and made payments on the vehicle until I paid it off in November. Thankfully, the seller agreed to accept installments. Regardless, my boyfriend insisted on having his name on the title as well. I firmly refused, stating that since I paid for it, it belongs to me. He became upset, but I was unmoved. I recently held 2 jobs, one as a cashier at a stagnant supermarket and the other as an informal caregiver for an elderly woman suffering from Alzheimer's disease. I have repeatedly urged my boyfriend to assist by finding a job so we can move out of his grandmother's house and into a place of our own, but he remains completely uncooperative. We have 2 dogs and a cat. While I love them dearly, I am the one covering all their expenses, from food to medical bills, not to mention I pay for my boyfriend's marijuana weekly, and it feels like I receive nothing in return. My boyfriend has a dog and is eager to breed it, believing he will generate a fortune without needing a job. The dog has not been bred yet, and we are not making any money. Instead, I am spending mine to feed his dog. I would feel guilty if I allowed her to go hungry. Returning to the present, I lost my job at the supermarket due to conflicts with coworkers and had been attempting to save money for a new house rental after getting my vehicle. I was making decent progress until I lost my job and lacked proof of the necessary income for renting, which hindered my search for a place. When I asked my boyfriend for help again, suggesting he could find a 9 to 5 or even shovel driveways for $20 each, he refused. People outside our situation have expressed their opinions, saying he is ineffective and that I should consider leaving him. I must admit, I despise cleaning, I really do. However, I try to help my boyfriend's grandmother wherever I can. While working my nursing job from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., I would then head to the supermarket from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. every single day. When I return home, I have no desire to do anything. After putting in full days of work, the last thing I feel like doing is washing dishes. When I confronted him about this, he stated that cleaning is a woman's responsibility. I responded, saying, "I am working 2 jobs, you can handle some dishes." He retorted that if he got a job, I would let the animals starve. He has been taking care of the dogs daily, leading me to believe we were sharing the responsibilities equally. I have been covering all the expenses while he acts as if I should be the homemaker. But he refuses to invest his time in a dead-end 9 to 5 job for a few months to help us move out of his grandmother's house, alleging that I would neglect the animals. What does that even mean? I suggested we could work different shifts, me at night and him during the daytime. Yet, he dismissed my proposal, claiming I would let everything go, and he would have to come home to a mess, which is simply not true. Reddit, I am at a loss regarding what to think. Am I the antagonist for no longer wanting to support my boyfriend? What should I do? I don't have the funds to leave, nor do I genuinely want to. Update 1: yesterday, I had to euthanize the dog I mentioned in my original post, the one my boyfriend wanted to breed. It was heartbreaking. The poor dog suffered from hip dysplasia and a neuromuscular condition. A kind woman offered her help for my dog's situation. Following the examination at the veterinarian, we made the heartbreaking decision to euthanize her. This woman drove over 3 hours to pick up my boyfriend and me to assist with my dog. She mentioned that helping breeders could jeopardize her fundraising and support initiatives. I clarified to her that I am not involved in any breeding. That is solely my boyfriend's interest. I expressed the concern that his desire to breed dogs impacts my future as I aspire to attend college, travel, and become a veterinarian. With him focused on this breeding venture, I feel trapped financially. After we returned home, my boyfriend's brother visited, who is 15 years old. He had a meltdown, claiming that everyone else has problems that don't matter, and he alone is struggling, feeling abandoned. The evening before, he had entered my room, yelling at me because I told him it was his fault he did not spend more time with his dog before she passed away. He grew furious with me because I allowed my dog to be around his, even though my dog is a rescue with a good temperament. My boyfriend insists my dog is dangerous, despite my assurances. I told him that if he wanted to spend time with his dog, all he had to do was ask me to put mine away, but he became enraged, retorting that I might as well blame him if anything happened to my dog. I told him he needed to leave my room if he was going to speak to me like that, and he stormed out for around 15 to 20 minutes. He has not spoken to me since. This morning, I prepared for work and left shortly after. I told him I loved him and would see him later, but for the first time, instead of our usual kiss and hug, he offered no response to my affection. Now, I find myself at work, caring for the elderly woman I assist, trying to figure out my next steps. I have a supportive friend in Georgia, willing to drive across the country an 11-hour journey to help me escape this situation. However, I have communicated to her that I need some time as I just accepted a new job. My van is in the shop for repairs, and while I am uncertain about my future, I know I don't want to end this relationship right after losing his dog. This is our first experience dealing with the passing of a pet, and I want to be cautious about how to proceed. Reddit, what are your thoughts?